Welcome to Garden Views, interesting conversations with interesting people who have done and or are doing interesting things. So sit back and enjoy. Welcome everyone into Garden Views, and this week we are visited with our guest Schuyler P. Robertson. He is an expert in legal matters regarding use of force, self-defense. He's been a private military contractor overseas, and he does a lot of contract work for defense attorneys and consults with other individuals and entities with regards to cases involving the use of force. So we're going to have a wide-ranging conversation. But before we do that, let's say hello. So how are you doing, Schuyler?
Good, Jeff. Thanks for having me on the show.
Sure. And just, give the folks a little background on yourself, if you want, where you schooled, obviously, where you got your training, and your, your current business, et cetera.
Well, I started out, went straight to the military after high school, served in the 82nd Airborne for a while, and then transitioned to the National Guard. I did a total of 28 years military, most of that infantry, except for a couple of years I was a medic. I did tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was also a sheriff's deputy for 5 years out in Colorado. And I started getting into contract security work. Worked for Army Corps of Engineers here in the States for a little bit, and then went overseas. Worked DOD contracts in Afghanistan, and worked for the State Department in Iraq, and then worked for other government agencies in different places around the world.
Okay, so obviously, over 2 decades in infantry and then some time in law enforcement, you're well versed in probably a wide array of armaments, from sidearms to long guns and all that kind of stuff that, the rest of us boys play with as children. When you were... So you served in Iraq and Afghanistan, both while on active duty and afterwards as a contractor?
Yes.
What's the biggest difference?
Yeah, I really loved Afghanistan.
Oh, really?
I loved it there. Yeah. I spent 17 months up in Mazar-e Sharif up north, and the area is beautiful. Love the people there.
That's interesting. I mean, I don't know why I'm surprised. I just never hear anyone say, I'm not surprised the people are lovely. I'm not surprised the country is lovely. It just seemed like it was sort of a bad situation most of the time.
It was, but up north, the governor there was very pro-freedom, very anti-Taliban. Like, he's a guy named Adam Ahmed Noor. Of course, he's been fighting the Taliban since the 90s. Yeah. And he got rid of the opium dealers in his province, got rid of most of the Taliban. When I was there, Western women could walk down the street at night and be perfectly safe.
Is he still alive?
He is. I think, last I heard, he was in Uzbekistan, and he's back fighting the Taliban with the Northern Alliance.
So the Northern Alliance is a thing again?
It's a thing again. They're still fighting over there. I've got friends over there. There were people we were trying to get out a couple of years ago that it was really sad, because like some of them, they're like, we're 3 blocks from the airport, but I don't know if we can get in.
Right.
And yeah, some friends of mine made it to Uzbekistan, and we're trying to get south to get back into Afghanistan to get more people out, but we just couldn't get everybody.
Yeah. So I heard.
That was some of the people I worked with down south, part of what were called counter-terror pursuit teams. They were Afghan soldiers that we trained and mentored. And a lot of those guys, like, they went to the Special Forces Q course in the States, and they fought their asses off. They fought until they were out of ammo.
I feel like I need to take a step back for those people who are younger, or maybe, didn't study the Afghan history, which is completely understandable for, even American listeners of a younger age. The Northern Alliance was basically an alliance of different factions, tribes, groups, warlords, Afghanistan is very balkanized, as I understand it. That had been fighting against the Taliban for years before there was ever a September 11th, and I believe that their titular leader was who the United States ended up backing as the president of Afghanistan. His name escapes me at the moment, but ironically, his brother lives or lived here in Baltimore, was a restaurateur.
Yeah, there was a guy named Masood. He was assassinated.
No, not him.
He would have been, he was like, I think right around the time of 9/11, the Taliban assassinated him.
Right.
And then
Hamdi is something.
Karzai.
Hamid Karzai. That's his name.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't believe I've forgotten that. It's like Ben Kingsley played him in the movie. Anyway, so that's the Northern Alliance. I imagine you were deployed when, in the early 2000s?
Yeah, I went to Iraq the first time in 2007. Went to Afghanistan the first time in 2014.
Both hot zones.
And I've spent about a little over 4 years off and on living in Afghanistan.
Okay. How about Iraq?
Iraq, I did about a year and a half total.
Okay. I know that this is not necessarily a geopolitical show, but, you were in both theaters. You're out now. Obviously, you've got contacts from the military and the private contracting phase. You were there. You saw things with your own eyes. Which conflict do you think turned out better?
Afghanistan, right up until the pullout.
No,
I think
that was there's some jokes in there somewhere that are in bad taste, no matter which way you look at them. But the pullout was bad.
It was. We should have stayed in Afghanistan just like we stayed in Korea. Give them a generation to get through school. I talked with a lot of people, a lot of Afghans, who, college students who loved what we were doing there. The big push was they wanted, and at the end, remember, because for a couple of years we were not doing combat patrols. We were providing support assistance and logistics assistance. The Afghans wanted Afghanistan run by Afghans. And that was even a split among the Taliban, because we're listening in on some of the Taliban communications. There was the Afghan Taliban, and then the Pakistani and Saudi Taliban.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The foreign Taliban wanted to use Afghanistan as an international hub for jihad. A lot of the Afghan Taliban were like, once this war's over and we've got Afghanistan, we're done. That's all we want to do is just run our country. But seeing the weapons that we left behind showing up in Syria, Yemen, Gaza, it's like, I don't think that worked out very well.
Okay. I know someone from the military, a spokesman, said whatever we left there was not functional, but that's not been your experience.
Bullshit.
Okay.
I don't know how you feel about language on your podcast.
It's fine. The bullshit is still PG anyway.
We left a lot of material for the Afghan military. And that's I heard one politician say, we didn't leave anything behind. We gave it to the Afghan military, who then lost it to the Taliban.
Okay. Well, however it got there, it got to them. Yeah. Obviously I heard your position on the idea to stay longer, but even if someone opposed the idea of staying longer, the abruptness of the pullout, the execution of it was, abhorrent. I think it was disgusting. I mean, especially letting down the allies, the people who were aiding and abetting the United States and the coalition and the allies, and letting them down, some of them forever. Whether or not someone agreed it was a good idea to stay in Afghanistan or not, to just pull out like that with really no plan and hold your, cross your fingers and hold your nose was not really a plan. And, I'm not a Biden hated by any, I'm a Trump, hater mostly. But the deal he made, the next president was not obligated to keep it. And I just thought it was done very poorly. I don't want to get too caught up in that though, because I want to hear about your story. But so you had said Afghanistan until the pullout. So at this point, would you say that Iraq has taken the lead, and how stable a situation, in your view, is Iraq? And we won't hold you to it.
Um, I haven't been in Iraq for a couple of years, but I was when I left there, I was up north in the Kurdish region. Erbil, they're trying to make it like Dubai, so it's Ace Hardware, Kentucky Fried Chicken, all that's down there. And I was living in a rented house next to a Christian school.
Oh, okay.
So I was there in December. The whole city was lit up with Christmas lights.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've actually had two shows on the Kurdish situation, one with an international war correspondent, and then one with an acquaintance of mine who's Persian by descent, Persian American and Canadian, and he wanted to make sure that we knew about the historic aspect of it. But both will say that Kurdistan, which is not a country, but the idea of Kurdistan, the Kurdish controlled areas are semi-autonomous, and they're a different situation. But as for the rest of the country, is it
like kind of like being on an Indian reservation?
Yeah,
they're a country within a country.
Except their conditions seem to maybe be better than the rest of the country, where in most Indian reservations it's sort of the worst, the reverse.
It is.
Okay. Do you think, does Iraq seem like it's at least a semi-functional democracy, and do you think it will hold? If so.
I don't know. Depends on how much influence Iran has. I know there's some deep-seated resentment between the Iraqis and the Iranians, but I think they're going to keep pushing until they have domination in the area.
Oh. Well, all right. Well, that's ominous. But again, this we're not going to solve any of that here. So you were there on active duty. We talked about that. So when you were a contractor, you were contracted with both the Department of Defense and the State Department. What would your roles be different with the different departments, or are they oddly the same, even though one is the State Department, one's the Defense Department?
Very similar. I was doing security, but when I was with Department of Defense, we were doing static security and what they called Guardian Angel, which is we were protecting the American technicians that were teaching the Afghans how to repair and fly their aircraft. When I was with the State Department, we were protecting diplomats. So they'd go out for a meeting and we'd drive them there. We'd be their bodyguards.
Understood. All right.
In addition to protecting the consulate.
Oh, that too as well. So they didn't have Marines for that?
No, they did, but I didn't realize this. The Marine security patrols, or the Marines that are assigned to a consulate, that's not a combat billet. They could be cooks, they could be whatever. And a lot of what the Marines do is they monitor the security cameras, they monitor traffic, and their main mission is sensitive document destruction in case things go south.
So if that was the case in Libya, Benghazi, those poor Marines never really had a chance.
Yeah, well, there were no Marines in Benghazi.
Oh, there weren't? I thought there was the embassy Marines. Anyway, I have.
But the embassy was in Tripoli.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, there you go. That makes sense. I had a friend way back when who was probably is a Marine, but he went through the JAG Corps, Judge Advocate Generals. He was a lawyer for the Marines. But he said, no, we're all Marines first. So maybe that was the case too. I don't know, but maybe that softens as time goes on.
Yeah, and they like to say that, but we were teaching the Marines how to conduct building searches, how to conduct security patrols. But mostly it's because a lot of those Marines that were there were not combat Marines.
They weren't trained for combat.
Infantry.
Or not trained for security. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were cooks. They were admin. They had different jobs. And then it's like okay, you guys also have to do the security stuff. So we were training them.
Are you allowed to say who you worked for when you were a contractor?
Well, I worked for Department of Defense, Department of State, and then at the end, I was working for the U.S. government, and that's as specific as I can be.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so we won't ask who got the contract, who you worked for, or we did, and you won't answer. Got it. That's fine. I understand. That's not allowed. Yeah. Okay, so let's bring you back home to stateside, and you have, you're still working sort of in the same arena, but in a little bit different. So let's talk about the transition when first of all, how did you decide, or when was it decided for you that the contracting work was part of the past?
When we pulled out of Afghanistan, what ended up happening there was a lot of contracts just got pulled. And so companies that were short of people suddenly had a very deep bench. The company I was with, we went from, like, I could work 270 days a year if I wanted. There was just always a place to go. And then all of a sudden, about half the people, it was like, okay, if we're lucky, you could do 60 days a year. Right. It's just way too many people. And it's like, okay, I can get a job in the States.
Right. There was too much supply for not enough demand, or at least not paying demand.
And even with Ukraine, because when that kicked off on a Tuesday. On Friday, I got an email asking if I wanted to go to work with an insurance company to extract some people they had kidnap and ransom and life insurance policies on. But within a couple of days, they lost their window and couldn't get into the country.
Like that movie Proof of Life with David Morse.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. That's my frame of reference is mass media. I am American after all. All right, so let's bring you back here. So did you go to work for someone here, or did you start your own business, or what happened?
Well, what I started doing was back in 2016, I was reading a gun magazine, and I thought, you know what, I could write just as well as any of these other writers. And I think I've got just as much experience. So I made some query letters, sent them out, and started writing for Concealed Carry magazine. And so I've got 30, 40 articles now. And I was contacted by an attorney who said, because part of what I write about is a legal analysis of use of force cases. And I had an attorney contact me and said, look, I've got a client. He's been in jail 5 months. I think it was legitimate self-defense. The district attorney disagrees. I need someone to look at the evidence and present whether or not, as an expert, do I think it was legit self-defense. So that's how I got started as an expert witness.
Okay, and so what do? Obviously you come from a base of knowledge, but do you have to figure out what state it's in and get the statute, or was it in your state so you already knew what the laws basically were? What's your process?
Well, I tell every attorney I work for, whether it's a prosecutor, defense attorney, plaintiff attorney, if it's a civil case, send me all of the discovery. Because I don't want to help get a guilty person to go free. Mm-hmm. If I think your client's guilty, I'm not going to charge you, and I'm just going to walk away from the case.
So you're not a gun for hire, so to speak, pun intended. But I really don't even know of a better expression to use. You pick and choose the cases that you're going to stay with after you do your own evaluation.
Yeah, and the first case I got, going through reading all the police reports, and most of the police reports didn't really have any clues to what actually happened, because a cop goes and interviews a couple witnesses. Well, I didn't see anything. I was inside the store. I heard someone running. Somebody ran out, and then I heard some shots, but nobody saw anything. But there was a security camera that recorded what happened. And I read the detectives, arrest warrant affidavit, and then queued up the video and watched it. And the first time I watched the video, I completely missed the shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was looking for what the detective put in his report.
Right. And it
just wasn't there.
Right.
So he did a lot of embellishments. He made a lot of judgments about what was in the defendant's state of mind based on a grainy 2-second view of the back of his head. But what got me is he said this was, a busy spring afternoon during commute time. People are, there's a lot of people around, and when the shooting happened, cars had to jam on their brakes to avoid being hit by gunfire. Pedestrians had to dive to the ground. I watched the video. There's no moving cars. There's no pedestrians. There's no bicycles. It was very clear self-defense.
Okay. So the detective was making it like a scene from a movie or something when it was not at all that. Right.
And part of it, I think why, well, two reasons I think why. The first is because they knew the defendant's identity the day of the shooting. They didn't arrest him for 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happened was there was several unsolved shootings, and the media was putting pressure on City Hall. And they said, well, we got to show that we're doing something. So they went back through and go, okay, well, we got this case. Let's arrest this guy.
And the inference might be, hey, we cleared this case, but maybe, just maybe, it's these other cases too. We're not saying it is, but we're not saying it's not.
Yeah, and this was, the guy was an actual gang member.
Mm-hmm.
It was a gang shooting, but it just so happened that the defendant was 100% in the right.
Okay.
He was just happened to be standing in a parking lot when another car drive by. The driver sticks a gun out the window and starts shooting, and the defendant returned fire.
Yeah, when you first told me what you did, it came obviously the defense attorneys would hire you, but you mentioned that prosecutors' offices sometimes hire you, which I was surprised to hear. I shouldn't be, but I am, and I was glad to hear it. So how often do prosecutors' offices hire you for your expertise? And I assume that they're sort of on the fence of, whether we should bring charges or consider a civil matter, or, not bring charges because the person is, we think it is self-defense, or, whatever words they want to use. There's reasonable doubt there was self-defense. I doubt they very often come out and exonerate the person, but maybe they do. I don't know. So how often does a prosecutor's office retain you, and do they come out in your experience and say, we exonerate the person, this was self-defense?
Well, if the prosecutor hires me, it's because, and it's rare that a prosecutor will hire me.
Okay.
It's because the defense is claiming self-defense, and I'll look at it and go, no, this isn't it. But again, in that instance, if I think it's self-defense, then I'm going to let him know, no, dude, this is legitimate self-defense.
Right.
But also, like, police officers who have been involved in the use of force and they're being accused of being excessive, I'll look at it and determine whether or not I think it's excessive, but also civil cases, because if you're involved in any kind of self-defense situation, if you have to use force, you're going to get sued. Whether or not that's pepper spray or a taser or anything, you're going to get sued. It's just what happens.
Are you hired by defense attorneys or the insurance companies, or combination? I'm sure there's also plaintiff's attorneys that hire you also.
There are. Typically, I get hired by the attorney, and usually it's either an insurance company or the family paying the bill. Okay.
So it varies. It just depends if they have like umbrella coverage, or I imagine there must be, but are there places where it's like a private security guard that's, I don't know, a bouncer at a bar or a security guard at a jewelry store or whatever who's interceded in something and somebody's saying they used excessive force. Are you called in for those?
I haven't been yet, but I could be.
Yeah, I would.
Most.
I only say it because I would think in those cases they tend to have business insurance and general liability, and so it's more likely, when there's more likely a bank to pay something, it's more likely to hire expert witnesses. But since that's not the case, so we're here to hear your story. So who hires you the most frequently, and who hires you the second most frequently, and generally what are the types of cases we're talking about?
Most of the time, it's public defender's office.
Oh, okay.
And those are really charity cases. Most of the time, the cases I've taken have been where they made the right decision, but then what always ends up happening is because people think, well, I'm a good guy. I was doing the right thing. The cops are here to help me. I'm going to tell them exactly what happened. What people don't realize is, no, the police's job, especially if you have a crusading district attorney, if you're involved in a use of force, especially using a firearm, you're going to get arrested. And people will make statements to the police when what they should do is say, okay, when the cops show up and they say, okay, how'd this guy get shot? It's like, well, if this guy attacked me, I want him arrested. Well, okay, how did he get shot? Well, officer, I'll cooperate fully with your investigation after I've spoken to my attorney. And then stop talking.
That's good advice. I mean, the Fifth Amendment is ignored way too often. It's been a while since I've done criminal defense, but there were, a lot of potential clients sort of sunk themselves before before it was even a notion that I might get involved in the case just because of speaking instead of saying, I assert my right to remain silent, or lawyer.
And what people don't realize is when the police say, well, we have a couple of details we want you to clear up. Can you come down and just kind of fill in some of the blanks that are missing? Oh, sure, I'd love to help out. I want to be helpful. What people don't realize, once you're in that room and the interrogation starts, it's going to start off very friendly. They're going to ask you a lot of very general questions to get you used to talking to them. And before you know it, their job is to get you to say what they need you to say so that they can arrest you. I don't think anybody has ever walked into a police interview room and was able to talk their way out of it.
Right.
Unless they said, I want an attorney. The police's job is to keep you there and keep the conversation going until they've got enough to arrest you. And there have been police interviews that have lasted 18 hours.
Yeah.
And I had one about 2 years ago. It was an elderly man. His adult stepson was trying to kill the defendant's wife, the stepson's mother, got shot for it. The altercation happened about 11:30 at night. The police interview didn't start until 5 in the morning.
Wow.
It's like, okay, this is an elderly man who's been up for almost 24 hours.
Yeah. His tank is empty.
Yeah, and the interview lasted about 2 hours, and just reading the transcripts, you could see where this guy's answers got shorter and shorter. Finally at the end, he's just making one word, like not even really paying attention. And they asked him the same question 10, 15 different ways. His answers varied slightly in the wording, but the substance of his answers was consistent.
Yeah.
But because he used different wording, they said, well, he changed his answers. That shows he's lying.
Right. As opposed to he just used different words because maybe he thought in good faith that you were not understanding. He wasn't expressing himself well enough.
Yeah, and he was exhausted, and he ended up getting arrested and doing almost 2 years in jail waiting trial.
Right. And if he's that old and that tired and that frayed, if he thought that they were going to let him close his eyes and sleep for 3 or 4 hours, he probably would have confessed to being Jack the Ripper at that point.
Yeah. And there are, like, Chicago PD says, and England also now is saying before you interview someone, they have to have had 8 hours continual sleep in the last 24 hours.
It's like a commercial driver. You have to have 8 hours of sleep. 8 hours on, 8 hours sleep, 8 hours on, 8 hours rest, or whatever the rules are.
Yeah, it's sleep deprivation is an interrogation technique.
Oh, sure. Good luck, Chicago, doing that.
Yeah, you keep someone awake for 72 hours, they're going to tell you anything you want to know. Even stuff you haven't even asked them about, just so they can get to sleep.
Right. Yeah.
And there was a case in England in the 70s. They made a movie about it, In the Name of the Father, where this guy named Conlon, there was an IRA bombing. They rounded up some kids. He's in his early 20s. They rounded him up, and he was kept awake for 4 days until he finally confessed.
Yeah, I remember the movie. See, just like Proof of Life. In the Name of the Father is also my frame of reference. True crime is like very popular. I was going to say it's a big thing now, but it's probably been really popular probably ever since OJ. And OJ Simpson, that is to the kids. Do you ever get called to consult on any true crime cases for any of the TV shows or the news shows or anything like that?
I have not. I've done written analysis of cases like the Rittenhouse case. Sure. But
Kyle.
Yeah, I never got to call as a consultant to go on TV.
Not yet. Well, I keep writing enough of these outlines. Somebody will pick it up and call you up. Do you still do any of the old fashioned stuff? Do you ever do any of the security and bodyguarding?
Not right at the moment. I work mostly as a consultant. Just working right now because with some people getting some first aid supplies to go for some contractors in Africa. So trying to, because I used to be, one of the other things I did, I was a EMS instructor.
Mm-hmm.
So some people I knew contacted me and were like, hey, we're trying to get like 10 medic bags together. Can you help us find a source for it? Which most of it you can get except the medications.
Right.
Because American manufacturers can only sell to the U.S. to people inside the U.S., but you need a medical officer's credentials to buy, and these are, of course, South African and probably Zimbabwe people, and I found manufacturers in India that sell they're like, well, yeah, we can sell it to you in 10,000 unit lots.
Right.
It's like, well, we don't need that.
Right. So, were you able to solve that problem?
I did find one.
Okay.
It's like, there's one that'll just let us buy what we need.
Yeah, I won't ask too many questions, but there's often a bodega somewhere, someplace that somehow has everything that they're not supposed to have, but they're not even secretive about it. So
it's things that are not illegal in the countries. Like, it's legal to make it and sell it in India. Right. It's legal for them to ship it to certain countries.
Right.
So as long as they're shipping direct into Africa, it's fine.
Right. Yeah. I've been to some countries where they will sell things, but if you're an American citizen, they want your prescription. But if you're a citizen of that country, you could buy whatever it is you want because you didn't need a prescription from that country or whatever your home country was. Like if your home country was, say, I don't know, I'll just make it up. I totally made up, but Argentina, they could be behind me in line. And, if they wanted 6 different kinds of antibiotics, and it was legal in Argentina, they go, no problem. But me, I would need prescription. Which I mean, I guess it's good to know. Of course, these were also right by the ports, right by customs and all that. I'm sure if I got braver and went inland a couple of blocks or miles, and knew where I was going, I could find something. But I didn't and wouldn't. Well, yeah.
Yeah, and some countries, like Germany, for instance, like there's a lot that you can just buy over the counter there.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff that you need a prescription for here, it's like over there. Yeah, just walk into the pharmacy and pick up whatever you need.
Yeah, well, the problem with for the not-for-profits is they can't just fly you over to Germany and then fly you into Johannesburg or whatever. That's outside of the budget possibly, but maybe it is. I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends who the source would be. So, were you going to go actually into Africa, or were you just helping them on this side to supply the bags?
I'm just helping them on this side.
Okay, so that's cool.
I'm just providing a little bit of sourcing information.
Would you do the old gig? Would you go into another country and help with whatever, including the physical security, or is that something that's a younger man's game?
My pride and my ego want to say, yeah, I'd still do it, but I'm in my mid-50s now, and yeah, I'm starting to get a little too old for it. But what's kind of funny, though, most of the upper echelon contracts I was on were all older guys.
Yeah, everyone wants the grizzled veterans, want the old combat trained, sergeants and whatnot who have been in it and not afraid. Again, my entire frame of reference is books, media, movies, and TV shows. So I really have no idea what everybody wants, but that's what those sources have taught me.
Yeah, and with when I was on the DoD contract, that was a foot in the door contract. It was just, that was your base. The rate we were getting paid was like $170 a day. And if you had served in the military or law enforcement and you still had a pulse, they would hire you.
Okay.
And we had a lot of kids, like guys who did 4 years in the Army, got out, wanted to be contractors. Of course, this is right after the movie 13 Hours came out, so a lot of them had Benghazi fantasies. And some of these guys there were a lot that, we had a very high turnover because a lot of these guys that they'd hire would come out, do 2 months, and be like, I'm done.
Right.
Of course, the military deployments started going from a year to 9 months, because at that point, the Army didn't have to give people 2 weeks leave in the middle of the deployment. But now for the State Department contracts, you needed 1 year boots on ground time deployed in order to be eligible. But contracting time counts. So they do their 9 months with the Army and then go contracting for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Then get hired to go do the better contracts.
I see. So you were saying Go ahead.
I was going to say the last one I did, I applied for it, and it took a couple days to get my conditional offer, but then it took almost a year and a half for them to do the background investigation for the top secret clearance.
So, a question. You said 170 a day. I mean, I'm sure that's not everything across the board, but it's obviously, was, I guess, common enough to say it. I mean, is that, 30 days a month, or is that 5 days a week? Does anything come with it? Because 170 a day, I mean, it's not bad, but it sounds, that's like $50,000 a year. And,
That's, 170 a day for 7 days a week. For a year.
Okay, so
or however long.
so it scales up to more than 50,000 a year. But I mean, do you get benefits? Do you get health insurance? Do you get lodging,
No.
food, anything?
Oh, they pay. Yeah, your lodging and your meals are provided. But
Okay.
if you're also supporting a family back home, you're sending all your money.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying you're getting
Yeah, there
rich,
were
but
some people who, they were single, they used their mom's address, and they just banked all their money.
right. Yeah. Well, food
But
and
of
lodging ain't
course,
nothing. So,
yeah,
but it's but usually you're in a dangerous zone. So I was just trying to figure out if there was something more to it because the money didn't seem to be enough, and it's not. There's other stuff to it. There's food, lodging, and food, and and I'm
yeah,
sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
some of the better contracts, we're paying a couple hundred a day, like 360 a day. The medics were getting like 640 a day. Plus, we got per diem.
Well,
because we had to buy all our food off the local economy.
Well, that changes things quite a bit. I mean, that you've doubled it and then doubled it again almost. So yeah, now you're talking about sort of like the bigger money.
Yeah, and at the end, I was making over 500 a day. Going into the contract going into Ukraine was paying between 1,000 and 2,000 a day.
Right, but that was for a dangerous extraction mission.
Yeah, that was only probably going to be for a couple weeks worth of work.
Right. Are you still available for that kind of work?
I am, but the world's kind of toned down a lot now over the last, the early 2000s were the heyday of contracting.
See, it's funny you should say that because, like, everyone I hear, not everyone, but a lot of people I hear from, it's like hysteria out there, and everyone's acting like we're at like end of times and then Book of Revelations and this was the norm in the 80s. Yeah, I'm not saying that the 80s were the good old days, but and plus plus we were always worried about nuclear war back then, and we're sort of not now. I mean, I'm not saying that the world is in a great situation, but this is not particularly unusual. And I mean, even the last 20 years, I mean, the U.S. was in two hot zones during it. Probably others, if we want to count, Yemen and other missions. So it's funny that you should say it's toned down because you probably have a much more educated perspective on that.
Yeah, you brought up the 80s. When I was in high school, I graduated in 86.
Me too.
We thought that there was going to be a nuclear war and Mad Max was going to be our future.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, constantly, every day, I mean, you were worried about nuclear war every day. And it was often over things that were happening in the Middle East. Every day there was a tripwire, and they had this whole thing where, they one side would shoot your camp here, the other would take out a radar base. It was almost like it was a pre-orchestrated dance as to what was acceptable retaliation. And every now and then somebody crept over the line or too close to the line, and everybody was afraid, and and then we didn't have that fear again until after 9/11, and then and it seems to have retreated again. I feel like there's like two generations who think that what's going on now is like so unusual, and it for worse, it's not so unusual. I mean, this is sort of the state of things.
It is, but America is very isolated. People don't realize how good the United States is as a place to live. I've been in countries where if you knew how to use a stethoscope, you're a doctor.
Right.
I've been in hospitals that had dirt floors. And, when you see warfare around the world, towns getting hit with artillery and, warlords doing their thing, it's like that's normal in like 90% of the world. Whether life in the suburbs is temporary and can disappear tomorrow, and most people just aren't ready to accept that. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, this can change. You have to About a month ago, I was in downtown Portland, saw a woman laying on the sidewalk, probably under the influence of something, but she was half naked, looked like she was in some medical distress, so I called 911. I was on hold for 9 minutes.
Right.
It's like 9 minutes just to get a dispatcher.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no one's coming to save you. Be prepared to self-rescue.
So is that part of what your business is now, is helping people to train themselves?
I don't do that for a business, but that's a lot of what I write about, is how to set up a home defense plan, how to set up a medical plan. I also write product reviews. There are some products out there that are just absolutely terrible.
What kind of products are you talking about? Self-defense products? Are you talking about home security products?
I was at a gun show about 5-6 months ago, and somebody was selling the self-defense products targeted towards women. And it's like, this is the cheapest junk that's, if you tried to use it, you would get killed.
Right.
They had a stun gun that, like, I was zapping myself with it. One of my grandkids was zapping himself with it. It's like, this is not something you can use to save your life.
Okay.
Pepper spray.
If it passes the grandkid can zap himself without effect test, that's a fail.
Yeah. And the pepper spray they had, it was in a decorative holder, so it looked good on your keychain.
Right.
But to flip the safety off, you had to rotate the safety lever, which rotated the entire canister inside that fancy holster, so it just spun freely. It's like, if you need to use this and this is just spinning, you're going to get killed.
Right. And if you do get it, oftentimes you may just shoot yourself.
Yeah. I tell people, because, I carry pepper spray. I carry the same pepper spray I carried when I was a cop. It's like, don't buy your stuff at Walmart. Find out what the police use and carry it. And get stream, not fogger. Because the fogger, I've never seen that work on anybody.
Okay. It's too diffused.
Yeah, and then the wind catches it, blows it back in your face. The stream, that actually works. And I've had to use pepper spray more on dogs than on people.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, I guess that's a good thing. Not for the dogs, but, all right. So
I'd much rather pepper spray a dog than have to shoot one.
Yeah, fair enough. And yeah, we'd all rather you pepper spray a dog rather than have to shoot one, if that's the choice. Okay, so tell us what's the name of your business, and what is it that you do under the business, and then we can get back into your writing and where people can find the writing.
Well, my business is just my name, Schuyler Robertson. I don't have a business name that I use. I just use myself.
Okay.
You can look at my writings on the U.S. Concealed Carry Association website. And if you're a member, you can get the back articles that I've written. And I am coming out with a book. Hopefully it'll be published here in about 4 or 5 months.
Oh, very good. So what kind of services do you offer? I mean, I know we've touched on them, but we've gone in a bunch of different directions. So if you were going to do your elevator pitch to the world, what kind of services do you offer?
For attorneys, I offer expert witness consultation on self-defense cases, explaining what is legitimate self-defense to a jury, and an analysis on whether or not in a particular case it was legitimate self-defense or not, and why. And part of that, like a lot of people think, like if an attacker has a knife, well, he only had a knife. He didn't have to pull a gun. Well, wait a second. A knife is a dangerous weapon.
Right.
You can inflict serious bodily injury or death with one.
Sure.
But a lot of people think there's a hierarchy where, well, you shouldn't pull a gun unless the other person pulls the gun. It's like, no, once the line is crossed for lethal force, whether it's a knife, broken bottle, a brick, whatever. No, you're open to use any self-defense tool that's available to you.
Right. And I mean, your average person isn't like Batman and carrying around a whole host of choices. I mean, a gun may be the only thing you have on you for self-defense other than your fists and your legs, and the gun might be the only thing you have that can counter a knife.
Right. And for the case of women, 120-pound woman versus a 180-pound man, she is outmatched physically. I don't, unless she's an MMA fighter and he's not.
Right.
He's going to win just because he has more muscle.
Right.
But if she has a gun, like the old saying goes, God made men and Sam Colt made them equal.
It's a good saying by the Colts. And the writings, you said where you can find them? On
USCCA.
Okay.
U.S. Concealed Carry Association on their website.
Okay. And how would they find you? Would they just Google Schuyler Robertson?
They can, someone could Google me. I guess the only website I've got up now is my LinkedIn page.
Okay.
But they can find me through there. Or if someone wanted to hire me, they could contact me through USCCA.
Do they need to be local or can be anywhere?
Anywhere.
Okay.
I've consulted with attorneys all across the country.
Okay. Excellent. Do you have any war stories you want to tell?
Oh, actual war stories or?
I won't fact check it. Yeah, actual would be good. Yeah.
I say probably the most dangerous thing I ever did was one time I had to take the bus in Kabul.
Okay.
I had to go pick up a bag of cash, and so counting out a bag of cash in the backseat of the car in downtown Kabul, and then on the way back to the airport, I had to take the bus.
Yeah, well, I've taken the bus in Baltimore. That wasn't so good either, but it's probably different. But I didn't have a wad of cash with me. All right. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I did not?
Oh, I don't think so. Probably, we could have done probably several hours on different topics. But we pretty much touched over the basic.
Yeah, well, the point is to make sure that people know who you are and what you can offer them so that if they are in need of your services or want to read your stuff, that they could hire you and or find the stuff. But if you ever just want to rap about geopolitics or anything like that, just let me know and we'll schedule in another time. I like to keep the Garden View shows to usually an hour or less, 45 minutes to an hour. Garden of Doom is my other show that's a little bit more paranormal and whatever. Though, there's plenty of, history and mythology on that, but that one goes longer usually.
Yeah. One last thing.
Yeah.
What happened in Israel last week?
Mm-hmm.
Be prepared for it to happen here.
Okay. Well, that is dour. And yeah, I've been trying not to talk too much about that because it's new. I also feel like it's something that there's no profit in it. There's no winning, but I don't want to be asympathetic to the people of Gaza. I am sympathetic to them. But
most of the people that are there are hostages.
Yes, and they're hostages by their own government who they elected, and they haven't been able to have another election since 2007. I'm aware. It's tough. It's a very rough situation. But if the United States had to incur rockets being launched into it every day from Mexico, so there's some states in Mexico which are horrendous, but we wouldn't accept it. Israel is pretty much the only country in the world that's expected to deal with that and either do very little or nothing about it in retaliation.
Yeah, and when you look at Yemen, Sudan, what goes on in other countries, what happened in Israel is not that unusual. It just happened to be on the news.
Right. Yeah. This is cameras there, and there's first world cities, and it's an interesting place. I mean, it's also a hotbed. Everyone knows why the three major religions, or the three Abrahamic religions anyway, were birthed there, supposedly. But yeah, I mean, if anyone wanted to do a true history on it, you'd know that Egypt, ruled Gaza until 1967, or beyond. Israel actually gave back the Sinai in the peace accords. Part of the reason we give so much military aid to Israel every year is because the Sinai had oil in it, and Israel gave that up. So what Ukraine did, they gave up their nuclear weapons forever in exchange for security assurances. One of the guarantors was Russia. And people forget all of these things, and they say, "Why are we giving them money for nothing?" Well, they're not getting money for nothing. That they're getting money because they did something, and they've adhered to it. Egypt still has the Sinai, and in fact, Egypt has a wall with troops on the other side of Gaza, where they generally are not letting a whole lot of people from Gaza out, though that may be changing. I'm not entirely sure. And a lot of the stuff that's going on in Gaza, like, for instance, today, a hospital was hit. All day long, the news was saying it was hit by an Israeli strike, which I guess it's understandable to be your assumption. But as it turns out, it was a failed launch that Hamas blew up their own, not their own, but they blew up a Palestinian hospital in Gaza and these things happen.
One thing we used to see over in Iraq was the insurgents would use mosques as weapons caches.
Yeah.
And, when you got snipers up in the minarets and people shooting at you from a mosque, you got to shoot back.
Yeah.
Of course, then they go, "Oh, you attacked the mosque."
Right. The Alamo was the Alamo was a church. I mean, people talk about war crimes all the time, and they have no idea what war crimes are. Just like people talk about treason all the time, and they have these are fairly specific and rather limited things. Whether you like it or not, they are, and there's a lot of misinformation and all that, and I don't know, I stand firmly with Ukraine. I stand firmly with Israel. That doesn't mean I want them to commit atrocities, but if they have to defend themselves and rip the head off of Hamas to make it so, it's that's the nature of war. I hear a lot of people say, "Well, that's just a cycle of violence." Well, there's no the Germans lost World War II. There's no cycle of violence from the Germans. Japanese lost World War II. The Italians, we're not seeing cycles of violence from them. The Americas were conquered by various different, European powers, and there's not, still, Aztecs revolting and Ojibways revolting and things like that. So every place doesn't have a cycle of violence. I'm not saying anyone's right or wrong. I'm just saying sometimes when a war ends, it does in fact end. Not that everyone's happy, but it does in fact end. And this war needs to end, and it probably needs to end without everyone armchair quarterbacking, our best friend in the region.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's going to help is the Israeli government now saying they want more of their citizens to be able to carry firearms, because they had very strict gun control over there. And now they're saying, yeah, if we have more people who are able to carry and defend themselves, they would have been able to drag people out of their homes.
That's possible. I know they have a lot of citizen soldiers there, that everybody serves, I think, 3 years in the military. Well, not everyone. There are exemptions, religious and physical, etc. But yeah, it's complicated, and I probably said too much already, but and I hope I said it fairly reasonably and then fairly even mannered. I mean, I do want to be sensitive that there's innocent people that have nothing to do with Hamas whatsoever, or very little, or in situation that, they had very little control over it. But the sad truth of history is that people do suffer for their governments. I mean, it's just like when I say I'm against Russia and pro-Ukraine, doesn't mean I love every single person in Ukraine and I hate every single person in Russia. I'm against the policy of the Russian government and what they are executing. And I support the policy of the Ukrainian government writ large, not, the colonel who's stealing $10,000 a week from aid or whatever the case might be. I mean, it's a dirty, imperfect world.
And, my experience traveling overseas, most people around the world love Americans. They might not love our government, but they love the American people. And when you strip governments away from it, most people can get along okay.
Well, you would know that better than I, because you've certainly experienced more people in their home countries than I have. So I think that's actually a fairly optimistic note, and I think that's probably about as good a place to leave as any, especially since we've just gone over my magic 1 hour mark. But Schuyler Robertson, thank you so much for being on the show. Everyone knows,
Jeff.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. And like I said, if you ever want to chat about other things on geopolitics or wars and your perspective of what's going on, we can do a whole show devoted to that. And I will promise to try and talk less.
Okay, sounds good. Look forward to it.
All right, folks, thanks for listening, and make sure you share this information with anybody who you think can benefit from Mr. Robertson's services or read his articles. And, share the show as well. We like ratings, we like reviews, and we like referrals. All right, thanks a lot. You'll hear from us this weekend on Garden and Doom and next week on Garden Views.
Stay dangerous. Nigga run up on you. Better have that thing on you, man. Big dog shit. Like I was with my shorty in my city. High low date, but I still had it with me. Had a 9 milli, I was holding 50. Had a cup of Henny, we was getting tipsy. Black truck pulled up, shit was looking nippy. Niggas hopped out, so I had to get busy. 1 pop, 2 pop, hit him like Tupac. 1 drop, 2 gone, other niggas' shoes off. Told my mama I had to shoot him. Told the judge I had to do it. Told my lawyer it was self-defense, but I talked to God, but he knew I'd do it. Told my mama I had to shoot him. Told the judge I had to do it. Told my lawyer it was self-defense, I talked to God, but he knew I'd do it. Cops came to me, I ain't said nothing. Target on my back, I ain't doing no running. Now I'm on the news, shorty all shook up. Wanna lock me up, had me in hookups. Had to call my lawyer, said I ain't going in. Said don't worry, it was self-defense. It was 4 shooters against 1 man. It was 4 shooters who forced my hand. Told my mama I had to shoot him. Told the judge I had to do it. Told my lawyer it was self-defense, but I talked to God, but he knew I'd do it. Told my mama I had to shoot him. Told the judge I had to do it. Told my lawyer it was self-defense, I'd talk to God, but he knew I'd do it. Now I'm in the streets, niggas know I'm free. Bought 100 guns if a nigga touch me. Now I got groupies tryna hug me. Now I got bitches that never love me. All that grinding, all that crying. Beat me about it and now I'm shining. Catch me on the gram, flexing and flossing. Stay around me unless you checking and bossing. Told my mama I had to shoot him. Told the judge I had to do it. Told my lawyer it was self-defense, but I talked to God, but he knew I'd do it. Told my mama I had to shoot him. Told the judge I had to do it. Told my lawyer it was self-defense, I'd talk to God, but he knew I'd do it. True fucking story, man. True story. My story. Be dangerous, man. Stay smart, stay dangerous.